When you're driving, you don't want to end up on Skid Row. But then again, maybe you do. That's this week on Motoring 2001.
TSN's Motoring 2001 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
This is the 2002 Rendezvous. It's built by Buick, and for many, many years, Buick has been producing reliable, quality vehicles. I mean, many of our parents used to drive Buicks, and they rewarded this company with years and years of loyalty. But therein lies the problem with Buick. A lot of their demographics are skewed to an older crowd. They need the younger people. I mean, they saw what happened to their showroom cousin Oldsmobile, who had the same problem and who ended up getting the pink slip from General Motors. Now, can the Rendezvous attract a younger crowd into the Buick showroom? We'll try and find an answer to that question later on. But you know, standing under this Southern California sun, it's hard to believe that the winter of 2001 produced some record snowfalls in different parts of the country. But you know what? There could be a silver lining, because all that snow may have helped many people become better drivers.
I call it drivability car control clinics. I used to use the word skid schools. Didn't make any sense. This is learning how to control your car. This is learning how to use the brakes, how to use the steering, and more important, above and beyond everything, is how to use the eyes. People aren't taught how to drive. You're taught how to pass a driver's test, which in no way equips you to go out on the highway and deal with the conditions as we've had here in Barrie this weekend. I mean, blowing snow on the 401, slushy, snow-covered highway, and you've driven around the block and parallel parked, and then suddenly you're set free on a 401 or a 400 on a slippery side road. You're not equipped to deal with any of that. You have no idea what to do with the brakes or the steering. You've been trained to pass a test. You've not been taught how to drive. We disconnect the ABS, the anti-lock brake system. Just let them nail the brakes. Bury their foot in the brake pedal and just let the vehicle slide. Then the second exercise, we lock up the brakes and we get them to steer. Hey, it still goes straight ahead. Quick message there. And then the third run, lock up the brakes, crank the steering. They release pressure when they get a signal from the instructor, and my goodness, the front wheels start to rotate, and guess what? The vehicle will respond. Glare ice, AstroTurf, gravel, doesn't make any difference what the surface is. So now they've learned, as long as those front wheels are rotating, the vehicle will respond. So we've got braking and steering. And then we combine it with the collision avoidance exercise. We've got little nursery school kiddies crossing the road. Again, nice icy surface. And not only have you got kiddies crossing the road, pedestrians standing either side, my instructors, one of them steps in, and right off the bat, they've got to squeeze the brakes. Look up, steer around the kiddies, stop the car, in less than 25 meters, completely under control.
Beautiful. I've been driving since 1965. I drove tractor trailer and I drive a bus right now, and I always figure you're never too old to learn. There's things here I learned today that I probably maybe forgot or never knew in the first place. I found the course very good.
He covers the brake pedal, pedestrian moves. He squeezes the brakes. He steers around the kiddie, see the brakes are on continuously, and he stops the car completely between the cones. It's not because he's an expert, it's because he's using his eyes.
You're in a parking lot here, you're not on the road, but what kind of things did you learn? Is there anything that really stands out?
Well, it was how to stop, how to turn, how to look at where you're going, not what you're going to hit. That was the main thing. Because if you look at what you're going to hit it. But if you look where you want to go, you'll go there and you'll miss what you don't want to hit.
Right on, bring it around.
The response to this thing has been phenomenal, Brad. And I have a sense the public's sort of saying, you know, we've got anti-lock brakes, we've got stability control systems, we've got airbags, and we've got all the stuff built in. We're still crashing our cars. So the technology is obviously not the solution. And I think it's dawning on the driving public that there's a lot more to this process than they learned when they drove around the block and back to where we were in parallel parking.
Do you think you're a better driver now because of this course when you go out on the highway?
I think I will be, yes. Like it's something it's gonna be in my mind a lot now. So I think definitely yes, especially on the ice.
I don't know why they don't have this for people who are learning how to drive, you know, have this as a prerequisite like in Europe. This is what you learn, and you get through this, then you can go get your license. We might have a lot less fatalities on the road, right?
You guys have seen here already today in 3.5 hours what the students are capable of doing. You've seen the age groups. I mean, we're going from, what, I think 17, the youngest this afternoon, to someone in their 70s. I've had a student as old as 86 in the car. All ages, all stages. The neatest part, mums and dads are coming out with the kids. You're getting this really neat demographic, and everybody can do it.
The beautiful, majestic green fir tree, a symbol of Canada in all its natural beauty. Well, not anymore. I'll tell you why later on Kenzie's Corner.
Now, why the tailgate? Well, quite simply, they've hinged it on the wrong side of the vehicle. First Ow! All right. Ah. Suzuki were the first to introduce a compact SUV with a V6 engine. That was, of course, the Grand Vitara. Well, they intend to stretch that legacy, quite literally, with the introduction of this XL7 derivative. The XL7 designation is perhaps one of the more obvious nameplates. XL stands for nothing other than extra large. The 7, however, represents the fact that this is Suzuki's 7th SUV. In that mix, there have been some less than memorable names, the SJ410 and Samurai to name but 2. But as with all things automotive, the genre continues to get better with every attempt. You know, from the front bumper back to about somewhere in and around here, this XL7 is essentially a Grand Vitara. However, from this point back, it's a very different vehicle. The most significant reason? The distance between the front wheel and the back wheel, well, it's grown by over 12.5 inches. At 110 inches, that makes this the longest wheelbase vehicle Suzuki have ever produced. Now, that in turn makes a significant difference to the ride quality. Suspended on McPherson struts up front and a decent 5-link design in back, the XL7 brings decent handling, as was ably demonstrated in the pylon test. As for ride comfort, while less hobby horse-like than the Grand Vitara, the 7 still filters some harshness back to the driver and passengers. You know, as well as stretching the wheelbase, Suzuki also added 20 inches to the overall length. Now, that allowed them to add a 3rd row of seats. When they're both up, you got 7-seat capacity. Fold one down, you can still accommodate 6 and a decent amount of luggage. Now, the centre row slides back, comes into place. There's actually enough room for me to sit back here, although a long trip might be a bit arduous. The other thing they thought to add, rear seat vents. That means you don't suffocate if you're forced to sit back here. Power comes from an enlarged version of the Grand Vitara's V6. Now displacing 2.7 litres, this peppy unit pumps out 170 horsepower and 170 pounds-feet of torque at a very respectable 4,000 RPM. Throttle response is quick, and the 4-speed automatic transmission willing to work with the engine to maintain that feel across the entire rev range. Stopping power comes from a very competent ABS-equipped system that yields short, straight stops that measure about 114 feet from 80k. You know, if you sat in the Grand Vitara, you've sat in the XL7 because everything is pretty much the same. This one, however, is quite well loaded. Power locks, windows, mirrors, cruise control, rear wash wiper, decent set of gauges, and a great sounding radio. But there's 3 things that irk. First of all, the plastic, well, it's cheap personified. Secondly, the radio sits a little too low down. The thing that really irks is that the climate control system, even when it's set to cold, blows warm air. That mandates using the air conditioning. Now today's a good example. It's not warm enough to need the air conditioning, but to prevent the warm air, you've got to run it, which is going to cost you in fuel economy. Third seat aside, the thing that separates the XL7 from most of its competition is the availability of a low-range gear set. While many may argue that this is less than necessary, if you do venture off-road or pull a boat out of the water, this feature makes a world of difference. Safety-wise, the XL7 gets head restraints and adjustable seatbelt anchors for all outboard positions, dual front airbags and side impact protection. You know, the lone weak spot with this Suzuki XL7 has to do with the tailgate. Why the tailgate? Well, quite simply, it's hinged on the wrong side of the vehicle. First of all, it makes for a long walk around to get curbside, and second of all, well, you've got your back to all of this traffic rushing by. If it were hinged on the other side, you'd have a natural barrier and you wouldn't have a long walk. That aside, the Suzuki is a very nice vehicle. It brings 7 seats in a capacity that doesn't normally happen in this segment of the market. Combine that with a low-range transfer case, a V6 engine and affordability, and it's worth taking a look at.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns dealing with engine oil dilution. Every time you cold start your engine, it's inevitable that a little bit of fuel washes into that oil because you have incomplete combustion when the engine's cold. The lower the ambient temperature, the worse the problem. That's one of the reasons why you change your engine oil. Now, if you've had an occurrence where the engine has become flooded because of an engine tuning problem, you can actually find that the engine oil is above the full mark because of significant oil dilution. If you ever notice that problem, you need to change the engine oil as soon as possible. But a certain amount of engine oil dilution occurs no matter what you do. If you've done a lot of short trips in cold weather, think about shortening up your engine oil change intervals to combat this problem. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Just in case anybody was doubting that we were the leading exponent of safety, we just come up with this to show, yes, we are. This time, though, passive safety, which has been our forte, this time we're going to the active safety side much more.
To have fun in a car, it's a little bit like being on a trapeze. You can go up and swing around and have more fun if you know there's a net below. In a car, if you know that the car is competent and it can handle anything you throw at it, you can have more fun with it.
When we looked at the Buick lineup, we found that with four great four-door sedans, we had a solid business. But as you look down the road, our dealers were asking us for opportunities to participate in the truck market. While it didn't seem to make sense to us to do a full-fledged truck, we saw this emergence of the crossover vehicles coming, which were more car-based utilities, which we could then combine the ride and comfort that people are used to in a Buick, as well as giving them the flexibility, versatility, and capability that sport utility vehicles offer.
It's the first Buick that I would consider buying, in a long time. It handles well. I like the way it drives. I like the way it looks. I think it's a really smart move for Buick to have a vehicle like this to kind of change their image. They're, it's kind of associated with the older crowd, and this is a youthful vehicle. So I think it's a good idea.
I saw you last night at the news conference. There's something bugging you about the Rendezvous. What is it?
Well, all that time spent on design, and they got below the bumper and promptly forgot what may be the world's ugliest tailpipe sticking down below the bumper, looking like it just came from a muffler shop.
We're going to attract some younger folks who know a lot about Buick and know about our comfort and the premium nature of our vehicles, but have not come to Buick because they need vehicles with more functionality, much like the Rendezvous offers. So I think it'll be a great combination of both traditional and new customers.
They've done a great job of differentiating it from its ugly sister, but they also have done a wonderful job inside with packaging. They've done some innovative stuff inside. But will it be enough to attract people to a Buick showroom? Time will tell.
Who's the ugly sister?
The Aztec, of course.
I'm going to make sure it's not going to get lost in the shuffle, I promise you that. And the reaction that we've had really is showing us that it's going to be a winner.
Now, I do have one pet peeve with the new Rendezvous. You come to the rear, you want to open the back hatch, you see the latch and you pull it, and you realize it's not a latch. The only way to get into the back is through a release button on the center console or with the key. Not very convenient, although Buick does promise in the near future they'll put a release button on the driver's side. All right, let's head to the garage and join Bill Gardner.
Brad, that'd drive me crazy. You know, as far as I'm concerned, a vehicle's got to be user-friendly. I'd probably be taking that tailgate apart or that hatchback apart to try and figure out why that thing wasn't connected or didn't work. Drive me right around the bin. Anyhow, we've got some email this week from one of our viewers, Joseph Poirier, and he asks us, what can you guys tell me about piston slap? My 97 Honda Civic just turned 75,000 K when I started getting this tapping noise when I start the car cold. Is this normal for Hondas? This is what I've been told. However, I've never heard this noise from Toyotas that I've had. Well, I'll tell you, Joseph, my 91 Honda Civic Si has had piston slap since day one. It's not cause for alarm. It is a little bit disconcerting, though, if you don't know what it is. Basically, piston slap can occur on lightweight, high RPM engines like Honda uses. I've made a couple of diagrams so you can better understand piston slap. This outer circle that you see is the cylinder bore, nice and perfectly round, and the inner ring that you see is the piston when it's cold. You can see that I've drawn it in quite an egg-shaped fashion, and that's exaggerated, but it gives you the idea that when the piston's cold, we've got two areas here where we've got quite a bit of clearance between the piston and the cylinder bore, and until that warms up and the piston grows into a perfect circle, we're going to have a little bit of slap between the skirts of the piston here and here when you accelerate the engine. Now, as the engine heats up, the piston grows perfectly round at the skirt, and our piston slap is eliminated. We've got a uniform gap between the piston and the cylinder bore all the way around with the engine hot. One thing that you or a couple of things you should be aware of, make sure that your oil is full and of the proper viscosity. Make sure that you warm the engine up for several minutes without any load on the engine, and that will alleviate that piston slap. As soon as you put it into gear when it's cold or accelerate it if it's a standard, that's when you're really going to hear that noise. Kind of makes me cringe. So I avoid it at all costs. Just let my engine warm up for a minute or two, then I drive away and I don't have any piston slap. It's not uncommon, not cause for alarm, as long as you're aware of it. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2001.
If you ask an American about Canada, their typical reaction is, what? But if they ever actually have been here, their first reaction is typically, it's so clean. There used to be a television show called Night Heat. It wasn't on TSN, so you probably never saw it. But it was supposed to be set in any city, USA, but it was in fact shot in Toronto, always at night. The story goes that the director called for a lunch break. They were shooting in a parking lot someplace. When they came back at 3:30 in the morning, somebody had cleaned up all the garbage. They had to import more garbage to make it look like the United States. Well, that was then. This is now. We're at a freeway interchange west of the city. Look at the garbage that people have been pitching out of their cars. We got coffee cups, we got cardboard, we got all sorts of junk. O. Henry chocolate drink. I didn't know there was such a thing as O. Henry chocolate drink, and there must be, 7 or 8 empty bottles of this stuff. There's probably one guy in the world that drinks this junk. He comes here every day, finishes his bottle, and fires it out his window. I got a couple of long neck bottles here, Molson Export, cool. This is a litter bug who's also been drinking. We got a funeral sign. This is going to be everybody's funeral soon enough. We got a book there. Brad, didn't you see a woman reading that book on the freeway the other day? What do we got here? We got a golf ball, Buddy, you really got to work on your slice, okay? And listen, we didn't set this up. This is just what we found here. We got a little bottle of, what's that? Crown Royal whiskey. Well, that's comforting to know. At least it's a small bottle. And look at this piece. Here's a guy who's gone to all the trouble of bagging his garbage nice and neat, and then he fires it out his car window. What is happening to our country? And it's not just drivers. You've been to a high school recently, particularly the area where the smokers hang out on the edge of the property. Garbage everywhere. Again, coffee cups, cigarette packages. It's a mess. These are our young people. These are the people that are supposed to be saving the planet. They're our future. And what are they doing? They're polluting our landscape. I don't know where this all started, but it has something to do with governments passing the buck on further down the line. The feds say it's the provincial responsibility. The provincials say it's municipal. The municipals have nobody to turn it over to, so they put up signs, adopt this highway. The Loyal Order of Moose or something is going to clean the garbage up once a month. What's up with that? And yet this municipality, they're trying to beautify this area by planting all these little saplings. They put the protectors on there so the raccoons won't eat the bark. And yet they're going to be strangled in garbage if somebody doesn't clean this place up. Everybody wants to blame somebody else. Personally, when I see somebody at a stoplight throwing something out of their car, I want to rush around and grab it and throw it back in the car. I say, pardon me, sir, you dropped this, but I'm afraid of getting my face shot off. I mean, is it so difficult to get a little Shoppers Drug Mart bag or something, hang it on your ashtray, put the garbage in there, and take it home with you? Because if we're looking for somebody who's responsible for this mess, all we have to do is look in the mirror. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, we've only spent a brief time in the new Buick Rendezvous, but first impressions are good. Buick definitely has done its homework. But as we heard earlier, this car is heading into a very, very crowded market, and it's up to Buick to get the word out in order to get those younger people into the showroom. And you know, even though Graham Fletcher doesn't meet Buick's younger demographics that they're looking for, we've still convinced him to do a test drive on a future program. So make sure you join us for that and much more as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
The existing Dodge Ram is aging. Since the current Ram came out in, what was it, 94, that put everybody on their ear with such a radical new design. But that's exactly what they needed, because everybody had given up on the Dodge pickup because it was just aging so much, it was so old that nobody was buying it. Certainly nobody was buying it who actually had to drive it.
Well, I don't know what the heck else I can do with a truck, really, after seeing this thing. I was really impressed. I wasn't expecting to be as impressed as I am with it, so that was a pleasant surprise.
It's also very practical. Combines the best of all possible worlds, except gas mileage.
TSN's Motoring 2001 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.